What we're being asked to do tonight is to add in some things that had not yet been addressed in all the workshops we'd had before, specifically some additional information on transportation, additional housing information, and really the first comprehensive economic input we had gotten, which I frankly found fascinating and very useful. So I really have no problem making those general strategy additions, but there are some things in here I have some caution about, and I just want to mention those. At the very beginning of the presentation, Ms. Fogarty showed us a map of the city of Santa Monica and pointed out that almost all the change we're anticipating is going to happen in only 10% of that map. Well, in the last couple of months, we have seen some new reports from our Rent Control Board and other sources about what's happening in that other 90%, which is the housing part of our city. And I think, frankly, that this whole process, and not just the housing element, which we'll get to later tonight, has to more specifically address how we're going to preserve what we have in that 90%, because we are losing too much there. And if we focus all of our attention and all of our expertise on the 10% we think is going to change, we may turn around some morning and find out the rest of our city's gone, block by block, lot by lot. It's happening now. We have lost so many units of affordable housing that, as Ms. Eldridge pointed out, this community has flipped. It's turned to be a different place from what it was. And a community is not just buildings or an economy. A community is people. And I think we have to keep that obligation first and foremost. Housing also brings us to the issue of workforce housing, and I thoroughly agree with Mr. Bowen about the need to have emergency workers here in town when an emergency happens. And when we began that workforce housing discussion, and I joined that committee, it was with the understanding that we were looking at how to make sure that we had significant numbers of police and firefighters and nurses and paramedics and first responders to emergencies able to live in Santa Monica. And the process kind of grew like Topsy, and pretty soon we were talking about all kinds of other people and finding housing for them. If you listen to the numbers, it's enough to make you faint. The depth of subsidy it takes to provide a condo to somebody to live in Santa Monica who's on a first provider type income. And somehow in defining the affordability level, we got ourselves into ownership housing. And in fact, I heard Ms. Katagiri say something about with current condo prices, it takes very deep subsidies for someone to live in Santa Monica. In truth, it takes very deep subsidies for someone to own in Santa Monica. If someone is in the income level we're talking about for first responders, the truth is there is rental housing out there in that price range at market. It's the extremely low income people that I think we need to put our resources toward. And so my caution on workforce is let's define which workforce and what subsidy, and let's look at whether we're really doing that great a favor to somebody to provide ownership when they're in that kind of income level. Because frankly, the reason why that's become the great American dream, among others, is the tax benefits. And if you're in that middle tax bracket, the benefits aren't that great, and perhaps the risk of ownership is greater than we're understanding as we're moving forward with this. So, double-edged sword. Yes, I want to provide housing for our emergency providers, but I don't want to take resources away from low and very low income housing. We need to keep doing that. And I don't want to miss the target and be providing a kind of housing that really doesn't benefit the people we think we're helping. The other big caution I had in this was the idea that we would provide yet more office space. And I know that office rentals are very high in this market, but to bring in yet more big firms with, acres and acres of Dilbert-style cubicles doesn't really, to me, further the goals of this city. Yes, we need the kind of office space that's occupied by a small local accountant, tax preparer, that kind of office space. But we overbuilt our office space back in the 80s and 90s, and I don't want to see us continue that mistake. Whereas retail provides a place for local people to go to shop, a big regional type office doesn't really do that. Now, obviously the tax preparer, that kind of little kind of local office does. So I think we need to hone our targets a little bit there too. And if to the extent that we are going to have expanded commercial, I think we should be focusing on residents serving retail and not on regional office. And office space tends to end up being regional because the demand for it is regional. So with those cautions and knowing that those don't really undo what has been presented to us, and with my oft-repeated statement that I'm looking for transit-oriented development, not merely transit-anticipatory development in Santa Monica, I will move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded.